There must have been something good to come out of 2021. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am taking you through all of the books that I loved every month in 2021. 2021 was a bit of a weird year for me personally, but thankfully books were always there to kind of lighten the mood and help me along the road. I'm going to talk about 12 books that I absolutely loved this year, one for every month of the year, now that we are finally at the end of the year. So let's take a look at what they were. The book that I loved the most in January was Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. I've read some of Dolly's books before. I have read Everything I Know About Love and I absolutely adored it, but this is Dolly's first novel. We follow here Nina, who has just come out of a long-term relationship and is starting to date again. And as you can imagine from the title, she does get ghosted quite a lot throughout the book, and it is kind of a commentary on how dating has changed from the time of, say, our parents or our grandparents to how it's become a little bit more expendable in the present moment. There was a lot that I really loved about this book. Something that really struck a nerve with me was the portrayal of dementia here. Nina's father is in the very early stages of dementia, and as somebody who has had a member of their family also affected by this, I felt like it was portrayed with such care and such love. I don't know if I really enjoyed how it was written is the right way to say it, but I did feel like it was really well written and I did get a lot from having read that. Of course, as somebody who has dated in the present moment, knowing what ghosting is like, knowing how prevalent it is, there were a lot of things that I had associated with, even in the situation that I was in back in January. I knew that ghosting was a thing. I knew that there were people who would pick up a phone and talk to you and then never speak to you ever again. And I felt like that was something that, at most of the time, was portrayed really well. There's also a discussion here about female friendships and how they can kind of go through ebbs and flows in life. How things aren't always as clear cut as they used to be when we were younger. And I did love how Nina and her friend Catherine kind of worked out what was going on between them as their lives kind of diverged and as their priorities kind of shifted. I felt like that was discussed also really well in this book. There were a couple of things in the book that I didn't totally enjoy. There was a relationship that Nina had with her neighbour that I didn't love how it was left. But other than that, this was a really great book. One thing that I will say about this book is that Nina was a food writer, and I do feel like I would have loved to see a bit more food in here. The best book that I read in February was The Roommate by Rosie Danan, and I love when I read a book that's a debut but doesn't feel like a debut. This is about Clara, who goes out to the east coast of America to live with a guy that she has been texting and has got feelings for, but it turns out that he is going on tour with his band and instead she's going to live with his roommate called Josh. Clara is kind of sheltered, a little bit naive and innocent, but Josh is a sex worker. He is in the porn industry and he is quite well versed in the bedroom, something that Clara is definitely not. I didn't go into this book expecting a somewhat dual narrative, but that is what I got here, and I absolutely loved the insight to both of their characters. When you can see both of them starting to fall for each other, the little hints that you're getting along the way was such a wonderful thing to see. This was the steamiest book that I read in early 2021. It was topped by other books along the way, but I absolutely adored how those scenes were written. There are a couple of scenes that I tend to go back to now and then, but it was so well written. Something else that I really enjoyed about this book was the banter between Josh and his friend Naomi, which really worked out in my favour because Naomi was the main character in the Intimacy Experiment, which I read towards the end of 2021. And seeing the characters turn up again in that book was also really great to see. My favourite book from my March reading was Circle of Friends by Maeve Binchy. This was the first of Maeve Binchy's books that I had ever read, and to this day I'm still scolding myself for leaving it for so long to get to her stuff. In this book you're following Benny and Eve, who grew up in the very small Dublin suburb of Knockglen. They kind of come from different social backgrounds. Benny is kind of more well-to-do, whereas Eve was brought up by local nuns after her parents passed away. We first meet the girls when they are 10 years old, and we also travel through with them in the book to when they are 18, and Benny is about to go to college, leaving Eve behind her. However, there is an incident that happens with both of the girls are witnesses to on the day, and due to this event, it is somehow brought across that Eve can also attend university in Dublin. It also has a phenomenal commentary on social class, on teenage pregnancy in Ireland, on romantic love, on unrequited romantic love, on the freedom that you get for the first time when you've left home, when you've gone to college, and when you were actually striking out on your own for the first time. Since finishing this book, I've bought a couple more of Maeve Binchy's books, and they're all sitting on my Kindle waiting for me to get to. The Irish Readathon, which happens every single March, is something that is definitely going to fit one of those in. In April, the best book that I read was another debut, this time The Summer Job by Lizzie Dent. I listened to the audiobook of this and it was completely engaging. Another reason that I loved the audiobook was that in my mind I could completely visualize the phenomenal descriptions of the scenery in the Scottish Highlands. As I've just said, this book is set in the Scottish Highlands and you're following Birdie, who has taken on the job of sommelier in a kind of 4-star hotel that she wasn't expecting to be a 4-star hotel. She was expecting something a little bit more run down, kind of lower budget end. The issue is that Birdie is not a world-class sommelier. She's actually pretending to be her best friend Heather, who has gone off to Italy to give things another go with her Italian boyfriend. While she's there, Birdie catches the eye of James, who is one of the chefs at the hotel, and she kind of gets into a little bit of hijinks when everything starts to go wrong. She doesn't really recognise what wines are, which I understand because my knowledge of wine kind of stops at red, white and rosé. Something that I also loved about this book, not just the descriptions of the Scottish Highlands, but also that it goes into somewhat deeper categories. You have got stories of found family here, you have got stories of long lost relatives being reunited and reconnecting with each other, and I felt like that was done so wonderfully down at the end of this book. It was such a lovely read. I know that this is being optioned for a television series at the moment, and I cannot wait to see it being brought to the screen. In May, the best book that I read was Olive by Emma Gannon. And one of the reasons why this book stood out to me this year is that I connected so much with the main character. And when I have a connection with the main character, it's pretty much a green light for me. Olive in this book is in her early 30s and all of her friends around her are getting married, getting into serious relationships, starting families. And that is not something that she is looking for in her life. She doesn't know if she wants to have children, but she doesn't imagine that this is a road she wants to go down. I really loved how this contrast with Olive not being so sure about what she wants in her future and how her friends are very adamant about wanting children. One of them is going through fertility issues in the middle of this book. One of them has just had a new child. One of them is not quite sure where she wants to be, but she vehemently wants to have a child and that's it. I loved how that kind of contrast was portrayed and how realistic it was that sometimes when your priorities do shift like that, when a child comes into the world or when you and your partner start to get more serious with each other, things do start to change in your relationship. And I really enjoyed how that was portrayed as something that I can associate with myself. Something else that I really enjoyed about this book was that at the start of many of the chapters, actual real life stories from women who for any reason or another have chosen to live child free are also included. And that was really eye opening to me because for so many women, it's not that they don't want to have children, it's that they can't have children, it's that they don't think they can deal with the responsibility, it's that financially it's not going to work out for them, it's that biologically it hasn't worked out for them yet, but they are still hopeful. Reading and listening to all of these stories was a phenomenal experience for me, and I am eternally grateful that I got the opportunity to do that. I don't want to say that I put pressure on June, but it is the month of my birthday, and I feel like if I don't read good books in June, the whole year is ruined. But luckily I read a really great book this year in June, and that was Bad Choices by Lucy Vine. This is maybe Lucy's 3rd or 4th book by now, and I've read the others that she has written so far and absolutely enjoyed them immensely. But this one just felt like a whole other level. One of the reasons that I think I connected with it the most is that in June I was going through quite a heavy breakup, and this book didn't really feature on romance, but more so on the importance of platonic friendships and the strength of a friendship that you have with your girlfriends. That was something that really anchored me in that time, and having that book there as a kind of a reference point to go to was just phenomenal. In this book, you have Nat and you have Zoe, who meet one day in the bathrooms at school because Zoe is in there crying her eyes out. It is both of their birthdays, and they discover that on the day. And then they decide to form a beautiful friendship with each other just based on the fact that they have a common birth date. Luckily, this works out for them, and they go through life with so much love for each other. And you follow them in a kind of a One Day by David Nichols setup, where you're following them on each birthday that they have going throughout their lives. This book is chock full of pop culture references that I would have recognized from growing up around the same time and around the same age as the girls were. So you have Ms. and Sugar and Bliss magazines, and the like really gritty lip gloss that used to come with them as a free gift that I was obsessed with and formed the basis of my beauty packets when I was little. This is another dual narrative book, and I absolutely love dual narratives to get really into the mindset of each of the characters. Here, I think I identified with Natalie a little bit more than I did with Zoe, just because we had similar anxieties, we had somewhat similar situations going on in life, we had somewhat similar concerns, worries, experiences together, and that was something that just drew me into her character a little bit more than Zoe. But that is not to say that I didn't enjoy reading Zoe's storylines too. There are also quite a lot of heavy topics discussed in this book. There is infidelity here. You've got a character who is going through an abortion. You've got a character who is coming to terms with her sexuality, then going into her first relationship with someone of the same sex, and then that relationship breaking down due to the aforementioned infidelity. Don't always love reading infidelity in books, but it was handled really well here. And I also loved reading about the relationship, how that did have a huge impact on their relationship together, and eventually how it didn't exactly turn out so well for them. Overall, I really enjoyed this book so much, and it's probably into my top 3 of the year. If when you're thinking about my reading tastes, you're thinking light, fluffy, contemporary romances, my choice for July is probably going to be a bit of a curveball. In July, the book that I liked the most was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I read this as a buddy read with Victoria from What Victoria Read, and discussing this after every couple of 100 pages was just a phenomenal experience because we got an insight into what each other was thinking about the book, things that she had picked up on that I hadn't, and vice versa, and it just made for a much more in-depth reading experience that I cannot wait to do with either her or somebody else again in the future. My Dark Vanessa follows the titular Vanessa, who was in a not legal at all relationship with her teacher, Mr. Staines, when she was maybe 17 or 18 years old. She was in boarding school and he preyed on her, he groomed her, and she is kind of slowly coming to terms with that, slowly figuring out what that has meant for her. Except that she doesn't see this relationship as illegal, she doesn't see it as non-consensual, she doesn't see that there was anything wrong with the relationship that the two of them would have had at the time. I really loved that this was not a dual narrative but a dual timeline book. So you're seeing how it happened in the past, and as somebody who is a little bit older and knows what red flags to look out for in relationships, you're looking back at things that shouldn't have happened with Vanessa and Staines. You're looking back at signs that she should have picked out on, but because she was young, naive, and her mind was a little bit more moldable than somebody of my age would have been, she completely fell for the traps. It's also really interesting to see her reaction to it in present day times when the story is starting to take legs again, because accusations are coming back out again about Staines from other women who have also been affected by him. Obviously, this book comes with a plethora of trigger warnings. It's not one to go into if you are of light disposition, but if you think you can handle any of the topics that are discussed here, it is a book that you absolutely cannot miss out on. So for August, we'll go back to kind of lighthearted. For August, my favourite book was Did You Hear Mammy Died by Seamus O'Reilly. Seamus is one of my favourite people on Twitter at the moment. He has got a well-known across Irish Twitter thread about the day that he turned up to meet the president while accidentally off his nut on ketamine. It's one that you absolutely cannot miss out on reading, and I will try and remember to put it in the link below. This is Seamus's memoir as growing up as a child of 11 children. But his mother passed away from breast cancer when Seamus was 6 years old, so that left Seamus and his 10 siblings under the care of their father. The ages of the children ranged from 17 to about 3 years old, so you have got everything across the spectrum there. Reading a situation like that was heartwarming and was hilariously funny, but there were so many poignant moments. This book won one of the Irish Book Awards at the start of December, and it is absolutely deserved here. If you haven't picked it up yet, I absolutely recommend that you do. It's very fast paced and you will probably get through it in about a day or two, depending on your reading speed, but it's definitely one you should take a look out for. Have you ever had a book that lounged on your TBR for years, and when you eventually get to it, it's one of the standout books of the year? Well, that was Girlhood by Kat Clark, which I read in September, and it was by far the best book that I read in September. I went into this book not really knowing anything about it, mainly because there was no blurb on the back of the book. And I think that was the making of me when I was reading it, because I just went in with zero expectations and was completely blown away. You're following Harper, whose twin sister Jenna has passed away before the book begins. And Jenna was suffering from an eating disorder for quite a lot of the late stages of her life, and that is eventually what took her life. Harper blames herself for this death, and she is in boarding school now and not really adjusting to how things are without her sister by her side. A new girl starts at the school called Kirsty, and it seems that Harper and Kirsty have something in common. They have also lost a family member. But things start to turn a little bit sinister, and it does seem like Kirsty is not what she is putting across to the world. There was a lot that I loved about this book. There were a lot of rituals and reminders of Jenna that, even though we hadn't met her as a character, I felt like we knew quite a lot about her. I felt that we knew what her personality was like, who she was as a person, because she was still so present in this novel. There's a really tight friendship group that Harper has when she's up in school, and that was definitely something that I loved reading, especially when it's a young teenage girl who's the protagonist of the book. There was very little to no romance in this book, and I feel like that was a definite plus side here. It's not a book that I felt needed to have a relationship for it to thrive. And if Harper had been looking for a partner while she was up there, I don't think it would have been a great book that I would have loved as much. Haven't read any of Kat Clark's other books, but I do know that she has got quite a few others that I am super excited to check out now. In October, the best book that I read was A Class Act by Rob Beckett. Outside of booktube and books and reading, one of my true loves is stand-up comedy, and Rob is one of my favourite stand-ups in the UK at the moment. I don't know what it is about him, I just feel like he has got such a vibrant personality that I feel like I would gel really well with, and I really love watching him on Taskmaster or 8 out of 10 Cats, and I absolutely adore his parenting podcast with Josh Widdicombe, which is ironic because I do not want to have children. A Class Act is Rob's memoir, and you can tell straight away from reading this book that it was 100% not written by a ghostwriter, because so much of Rob is left on every single page of this book. It reads exactly like Rob talks, like he thinks, and I absolutely adored that it was just his authentic voice coming out from every word on every page. Rob talks a lot in this book about something that I also have quite a lot of experience with, and that is the idea of not fitting in anywhere that you are. Rob was brought up in quite a working class family, so he never felt like he could fit in around the world of his wife, who was brought up in quite a middle class upbringing. Now that he has found quite a lot of success in his chosen field, he does feel like he has kind of been a little bit alienated from some of his friends from back home, who now see him as the well-to-do comedian who's always on TV. I might not have exactly the same experiences in that situation, but I do know how it feels to feel a little bit out on the premises when you're watching people and feeling a little bit like this isn't the area for you. I also love that you can tell straight away from this book how much of a family man Rob Beckett is, that you can tell he absolutely adores all of his siblings and his parents, and you can see just how much he loves his wife Lou and their 2 kids. I absolutely adored this book. This was the first of the celebrity comedy memoirs that I read in this year, and I think it was a great place to start off. The best book I read in November, and one of my most anticipated reads across the whole of the year, was On a Night Like This by Lindsay Kelk. In here, you're following Fran, who is working as a personal assistant to one of the world's biggest pop stars. And through a strange turn of events, it turns out that Fran is going to be attending the Glitter Ball, which is one of the world's most prestigious and secretive parties on an island off the coast of Italy. Here she meets an American man called Evan. They have one phenomenal night together. Don't swap numbers, don't swap any contact details, don't share anything deep about their personal lives. They think they're just going to have one night and leave it to the side. Lindsay's talent for writing boyfriends of main characters who turn out to be absolute sleazeballs and scumbags shines through here, because you can tell that Fran's relationship is not the one that she should be in at the start of this book. I absolutely loved watching Fran grow in confidence, grow her self-esteem, and find out who she truly is. There isn't a very heavy romance plot in this book. It does feature, but it's not the be-all and end-all of this book, and that was something that I absolutely adored, because the biggest relationship that I felt should have had the most impact here, and did, was how Fran felt about herself and how she reconnected with herself and found out what it was that she truly wanted in life. This was, as I said, one of my most anticipated reads for the year, and I was completely not let down by this one. I have absolutely no worries that the next book that Lindsay brings out is just going to be as good. And so we come to December. And to be honest, the competition for the best book that I read in December was over by about the fourth. Bear Town by Frederick Backman. Paige from Pages with Paige and I tried to buddy read this book in July 2020. And for a number of reasons, both of us put it to the side. But both of us also knew that this was a book we were going to come back to. I will say that this is quite the heavy book. It does deal with rape, sexual assault, victim blaming. If that is not your thing, if you are in any way affected by any of that topics, I don't think that this is the book for you. I will say that I felt like this book was phenomenally written. It really does leave a punch and an impact on you. There's also quite a lot of God complex that are given to quite a lot of the characters in here, especially the ones who are maybe 15, 16, 17 throughout the course of this book. And it just shows how malleable young people's minds are when you just continue to shower them with praise, tell them that what they're doing is the right thing, that they then go through their life with this God complex that everything that they're doing is the right thing, every decision that they're making is the right one. That was portrayed really well here, and so impactfully. I will say that this book made me wish that I could speak Swedish, because I have a feeling that reading this book in its original Swedish form would be even more impactful. Those were the 12 best books that I read across 2021. Did we have any in common here? Did you absolutely love any of the books that I have read? Or why don't you tell me one of your favorite books from across 2021? Don't forget to like and subscribe, because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.